moral hazard. So you guys are probably familiar with this from some of your micro courses, but moral hazard is the issue that one party to a relationship may misrepresent what they're doing. They may take an action that's different than what they tell somebody else. They can hide their action. So in this case, they may pretend to be sick when they're not in order to make money. It's all these moral hazard models rely on asymmetric information, that the lender and the borrower have different information about reality. In a small village, it's hard to have asymmetric information because everybody can see everything. So the closeness of the bond leads to this really interesting flexible contract. Now, even more interesting, I think, or unexpected, was the bottom one. Sometimes the lender is hit with a negative shock. I lent you money, but it turned out I got sick. It turns out if I get sick as a lender and you're my borrower, you pay me back more, and you pay me back faster than if I had a normal year. So this is really unusual. This is why these relationships feel so egalitarian. It isn't like there's like a dominant lender sort of dictating terms to the borrower. These are like people who help each other out in different years, so that in a given year, the borrower may help out the lender. So the way Udry calls these contracts, and this has been a very influential way to think of financial markets in developing countries, is these deals are a combination of credit and insurance. Why are they partially insurance? Well, I basically get better terms when something bad happens to me. That's what insurance is, right? Like I get a payout when something bad happens to me. Whether I'm a borrower or a lender, I get better terms if something bad happens to me, and that's only sustainable in a village because everybody has good information. The asymmetric information problem is reduced. Okay, let me pause for a second and see if people see any other patterns here that are noteworthy. Yeah. So there, I mean, you see for the borrower, sometimes it's negative too. Udry gives two explanations. One is maybe to some extent these contracts are partially transfers. So to some extent, on average, the interest rate's a little negative because I'm helping you out. Maybe you'll help me out later. So I'm lending you money. I'm not really even demanding interest. You kind of just pay back. He mentions it's a very high inflation period. So actually getting to like exactly zero is challenging when there's very high inflation. So I think he thinks of these as closer to really zero, but maybe people slightly miscalculated inflation, or maybe there's some sort of just transfer. The other thing he mentioned, I think, in a footnote, is at some point he had to cut off his data collection. So there might have still been some additional repayment that was going to happen in the future, but he didn't capture it. So if you think that's the case, then all these interest rates are understatements of the true interest rate, because after a few months he leaves, and maybe instead of just delaying my payment by a month, you delayed your payment by 2 or 3 months, and you would have paid me back later. So I think we should probably think of those negative ones as being more like zeros, and the zeros as being low positive interest rates. That was my reading of the paper. It's a little weird, right? It looks a little bit weird to have the negative interest rates. Yeah. I think in this case, people were very aware of it and they were trying to deal with it, but I think they may have maybe miscalculated a little bit. And I think that's part of the issue. Yeah. He was there, I forget, for like a year or something like that. That's my recollection. But I think he was only there for one crop cycle, is my recollection. And it was like a good year. So he was there for this one crop cycle. Rainfall was good that year. People did well. So it'd be interesting to see what this would look like in a bad year. Not in this particular area. There's been a lot of work on these what are called risk-sharing arrangements. So these kind of combined credit insurance deals are a particular form of risk-sharing, which is just to say there's a lot of evidence that in informal economies and rural economies, risk-sharing is going on in a million different ways. That you and I basically help each other out when we're in need. And this is just one particular way that happens. I think there's a lot of evidence these kinds of arrangements are more general than just this case. Yeah. Why are the repayment periods? Can anybody think of why? There is a potential reason why. Can people think of why you have something that looks like 70 days here and 80-something days down here? There we go. Yeah. What's your view? Yeah, so if this were all weighted in dollar terms, like every dollar borrowed or lent were equally weighted, it shouldn't really work out that way. But if this is done at the level of the lender and like the lender's portfolio or the borrower's portfolio, then if he's not weighting it by the dollar amounts that they borrowed and lent, you could have these different averages. So if you're weighting it at the person level rather than the monetary unit level, you could get this. That's my only explanation. It's always striking to me when I see it, but I think that's how he did it. He was thinking of households, and each household sort of equally weighted as opposed to each dollar. That's my understanding. Does that make sense? Sort of? Okay. Okay. So what are some of the disadvantages that banks suffer? We already talked about these. In this setting, banks are far away. That's going to make them hard to access. That's why you wouldn't go to a formal bank. We already talked about this. They're going to have worse information, so they're going to be more subject to this moral hazard problem. Maybe I just don't want to repay the banks. I'll claim I was sick. I'll claim something happened. I'll claim someone stole the asset you lent me money for, and make you try to enforce the agreement. Make you try to go and take collateral from me. Because of their poor information, they also can't offer these very flexible contracts. That's another reason I wouldn't go to a bank. I'd rather go to my friend because I know if I get sick, he'll be flexible with me. The other thing that banks can't do is they can't necessarily call on these local enforcement mechanisms. They can't necessarily call on the chief or the religious official to enforce the contract. That local chief or religious official may side with their fellow village resident over some bank. They basically have to go through the legal system, the formal legal system. And in a place where there are no land titles, the legal system is very slow and understaffed. It may take that bank a long time to try to recoup that loan, much more than the value of the loan itself. So it may just not be worth it for them to make small to medium-sized loans. They're only probably going to deal in big loans to formal sector businesses where they can basically enforce the contract. Yeah. There's a tremendous number of more informal institutions. Credit co-ops are common. Farmer credit co-ops are common in many countries. There's a lot of smaller micro-lending groups, women's credit groups. So there's this whole diversity of local informal credit groups, even beyond, this relationship is very clean. That's why I'm studying usually one person to another. But there are these sort of solidarity group type mechanisms that are very common. And so those exist, but they're not formal banks. They're sort of say 15 farmers that get together and lend each other money in a little bit more of a structured way. Some of them are. There are some national credit cooperatives or sort of broader regional credit cooperatives that have local branches based or local groups. And so those are somewhere in between because they tie into a broader formal structure to some extent. And one of the big moves in recent years has been attempts by many donors and by banks to try to integrate a lot of these sort of group level institutions with the formal banking sector. So for instance, if there is a group of farmers that lend each other money, or women that lend each other money, women farmers or women traders that lend each other money informally, try to get them to establish an account in a formal bank and potentially lend money, like a formal loan from the banking system, to this group as a whole. So you can see microfinance as part of that, but now the real big formal banks are also trying to access these populations. So there's a lot of change going on right now in the financial sector in Africa, and the kind of divergence between informal and formal lending is sort of eroding because there's all these attempts to access village lenders, village borrowers. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly higher than these negative rates here. Yeah. 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 No, that's right. There's more temptation. Yeah. That's something that's changing also in a lot of less developed countries, that credit bureaus are being set up. So in many countries, just in the last 5-8 years, credit bureaus are being set up for the first time. Of course, you need a credit bureau, so I don't borrow from one bank, default on my loan, and then go to the next bank, default on my loan, et cetera. So now that the banks are lending to more individuals and they're kind of going down to this sort of village level or more decentralized level, they need a credit bureau, or else they won't be able to do it. So that change is happening too. So all these changes are happening right now in Africa in the financial sector. The financial sector is just changing every year. There's so many innovations, and one of the most exciting things is trying to tap into these local informal networks as a sort of entry point for formal lending. Okay, so maybe historically, these reasons were part of the reason why formal banking expanded so slowly. This is probably why. That said, all these informal channels have their own limitations, and we've touched on these. So we've touched on this. One of the big limitations is, maybe informal lending is really good if I'm farmer A, you're farmer B, I had a bad crop, you had a good crop, we help each other out, that's fine. What if we're all hit by a huge drought in 1 year? What's going to happen then? Your crops are destroyed, my crops are destroyed. I can't lend to you, you can't lend to me. Where am I going to go for credit? Because I can't access the formal banks. That is a major limitation. So the fact that we were, seeing, this village, Udry's village, in a good rainfall year may give us a little bit of a rosy picture of how good these informal lending institutions are. You need them most in the most difficult periods, and that's exactly when they break down. That is a big limitation. Now, there's one exception to that. There's an ethnic Hausa network. Hausa are an ethnic group that spans several West African countries, including these parts of northern Nigeria, and they have, centuries-old, very well-established trading networks in West Africa. And a lot of these traders are pretty wealthy and have a lot of credit, or they're able to basically offer credit. So the claim is that Udry makes, and there are only a few anecdotes about this, is the Hausa can sometimes basically lend in their network from parts of their network that did well in a given year to parts of their network that did poorly in a given year. So if several ethnic Hausa traders in a certain village didn't do well, and everybody in the village didn't do well, they may be able to call on their kin 200 kilometers away to lend them a lot of money. So that could provide some cash infusion into these villages. But again, it's still limited if there's like a regional drought, that even those Hausa trader networks a few hundred kilometers away might be affected. There have been droughts that have stretched across all of West Africa. And then you'd sort of have nowhere to turn. The other thing to think about, and another way in which people view this paper as giving a very rosy portrayal of informal institutions, is the same kinds of social pressure and social norms that basically mean everybody repays. If I basically break this deal with you, and the chief ostracizes me, and the local religious officials are mad at me, and everybody hates me, and no one will talk to me, and whatnot, those sorts of pressures and social sanctions and punishments can be used to enforce lots of other really bad things. So we can't just think of traditional institutions as necessarily being this really wonderful, benign, set of institutions that just allow people to trade and extend credit. Yeah, they may do that, but they may also reinforce sexist norms, racist norms, caste norms, etc. Tribalistic norms, and all those sorts of things. So there may be lots of ways in which these networks are used for good, but they may also be used to exclude people from this network to begin with. They may only operate in a sort of narrow sphere. Are there some other challenges for informal lending or limitations of informal lending that you can think of based on the reading or your discussion? Yeah.
So at this time, how did the villages end up selling the crop? Did they sell it to like a larger community nearby or something, like that would maybe come to the village and just buy all of the crop?
I think that was the case for tobacco. I think the small amount of credit that was going to tobacco farmers was there was one big British tobacco firm or something that went in with agents and bought up tons of the tobacco. My sense is there are lots of small-scale traders that are selling from here to town. But this is actually a pretty well-off area. I mean, they had a good year, but the way Udry describes it, a lot of people were growing not just maize, not just corn, but they were also growing vegetables for local towns and local cities. And that tends to be a pretty high value-added activity. A lot of them were using fertilizer and hiring labor, and it was a pretty agriculturally sophisticated area where they were tied into other markets. Like they could sell product in towns. But I don't think it was like one buyer. I know the East African agricultural market's better, but based on what I know about West African markets and what's similar to East African markets is there tend to be lots of brokers, grain brokers and grain traders in the mix. You're saying, why would I help my neighbor because maybe the trader will buy their corn and not my corn? But I think that's where the fact that there's so many traders and brokers makes it feel like it's not a zero-sum game. It's like there's so many options for how to sell and where to sell. The other thing to remember is a lot of the maize, in particular the corn, in particular people are consuming on their own farm. It's definitely the case that the vegetables they'll sell and maybe some of the maize, but a big chunk of their production they're just going to eat. So in that case, there really isn't much competition. We're just basically eating our own production on our farms. Yeah. So. Exactly. People were borrowing a couple months worth of earning, and that was meaningful, but it still wasn't enough to buy a tractor, to build an irrigation system, to do all these other things. For that, you would need much larger amounts of capital, probably. So that's another limitation. These are poor villages. They had a pretty good year. They're not too poor. They're not the worst off villages, but it isn't like they can mobilize enough capital to build the infrastructure they need to be rich. So that's a major limitation. Radhika. I'm not sure exactly. I don't think he presented data on that. I'm not sure exactly how much migration there was during this time period. I mean, certainly in Nigeria as a whole, there's been a lot of migration, but I'm not sure if in this region there was or wasn't. And that would affect the functioning credit markets, and for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very good question. And people have, for a long time, when they've observed African village agriculture, have made similar points, and they see it as a critique, which is to say, there's so much social pressure. What we haven't talked about is, yes, here we're saying, look, I want to help you, you're my neighbor, you want to help me. But underlying this in a lot of villages is a lot of social pressure to lend to less fortunate neighbors, and there are very strong egalitarian social norms in a lot of African villages. And that's great. Like, if my neighbor's hungry, I'm going to help them out. The flip side of this is maybe I'm not accumulating enough capital myself to invest in a much higher return activity, a better crop, better infrastructure, et cetera. So there's a feeling that these very strong norms, these strong sharing norms, basically in African villages, and I'm not sure what my own take is on this, but this is a claim that the anthropologists were making 70 years ago, 80 years ago, when they were kind of going and living in African villages, is there's so much pressure to share goods that no one becomes rich. But maybe that's self-defeating for the village as a whole in the long run, because no one is making like the critical big capital investments. So that could be a downside of this social pressure as well. Okay, so there are broader implications for success of microfinance. I already touched on this issue that there's many other forms of this credit. And I just want to make the point here formally that I mentioned before, that basically this was a good year. And if there had been a drought year, maybe people would really demand repayment right away because they're hungry. And maybe the year after the drought year, they wouldn't even have enough money on hand to lend to their neighbors. So there could be this ripple effect of a drought year on social relations where things wouldn't look nearly as good. Here, just the last clicker question here. Let me just go to this one and get people's sense. There's potentially a couple of different kind of things at play here, but I want to get your guys' take. Overall, if climate change is going to make volatility of rainfall, so volatility of weather, get worse, and that's one of the predictions of some of the climate models, is this likely going to make informal credit more or less useful relative to formal credit? And I've kind of been hinting at one set of explanations, but you might think of other explanations that go in other directions. So I'm curious what people's thoughts are. Sorry. Okay, so most of you chose what I think was the more kind of obvious answer based on discussion, which is to say informal credit will become less useful. So for instance, if it doesn't help you deal with these larger climatic shocks, it'll become less useful. What's one argument for why it might become relatively more useful? And there's some ways this could be. Who answered A and has sort of an idea for why you might think informal credit is increasingly useful in a world with climate change? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that it does smooth out consumption, right? So having that available to neighbors whenever the climate change actually occurs, there's more variability, having that resource there can make more useful.
Okay, so if there's an increase in variability, but the informal credit can still kind of deal with some of that, then it becomes increasingly useful. And this is just like really good credit that we know each other, we can have this sort of insurance component to it. The view behind B, I think, is if the volatility increases enough and there's sort of regional volatility, then our local networks just won't be useful anymore. So there's some story where maybe a little bit more variability makes informal credit just that much more useful to me, but at some point it kind of breaks down. Like it isn't useful to me anymore. Now, there's even a more complicated issue here, which is if the financial systems are organized really only at the country level, and those country banks are not insured even more broadly against regional shocks, then whole formal sector banking systems could get into trouble if there are multiple drought years in a row. Maybe not in Nigeria, which is a huge country, 160 million people, very large territory, but in a lot of the small African countries, climate change could just knock down financial institutions if there's several bad years in a row, unless those financial institutions are insured against that weather risk. They're on the reinsurance market, they're connected to broader, maybe Africa-wide banking chains. So it's really unclear how all this is going to play out, and it really depends on the structure of these institutions. There is no right answer in here. All of our points of view are equally valuable. I probably would have put B. My best guess would probably be B is the most likely, but there's a couple of coherent arguments for A. So, okay, see you guys on Tuesday.